She was just the girl who poured the water, invisible, trembling. Nobody. Or so they thought, the night the king of Sicily, Don Salvatore Moretti, walked into Il Giglio. The air left the room. Men who killed without blinking were sweating in their tailored suits. But when the shy waitress approached the table, she didn't drop a glass or stutter. She looked the most dangerous man in the world in the eye and spoke 5 words in a dialect that hasn't been heard outside the hills of Corleone since 1990. The room didn't just go silent. It froze. Because that wasn't a greeting. It was a death sentence, and only 3 people in the room knew why. This is the story of Sofia, the waitress who was hiding a kingdom beneath her apron. The dinner rush at Il Giglio was less of a service and more of a synchronized panic attack. In the heart of Manhattan's financial district, the restaurant was a cathedral of marble, mahogany, and old money. It was the kind of place where a bottle of wine cost more than Sofia's rent, and the clientele spoke in hushed tones about mergers, acquisitions, and things that would land ordinary people in federal prison. Sofia Rossi tightened her apron strings until they dug into her waist. She checked her reflection in the polished brass of the espresso machine. Dark circles under her eyes, messy bun, a uniform that was a size too big. She looked exactly like what she aimed to be. Forgettable. Rossi, table 4 needs water. Now! The floor manager, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, who smelled perpetually of stale coffee and desperation, snapped his fingers in her face. Yes, sir, right away, Sofia whispered, keeping her eyes on her shoes. She moved through the dining room like a ghost. That was her gift. She had learned a long time ago that survival meant not being seen. If you were invisible, you couldn't be hurt. If you were quiet, you couldn't be targeted. For 3 years, she had been a ghost in New York City, paying cash for her sublet in Queens, working off the books when she could, and never, ever looking anyone in the eye for longer than a second. But tonight, the air in Il Giglio felt heavy. It wasn't the usual Friday night tension. It was thicker, sharper. The kitchen staff had been on edge since 4 p.m. The head chef, a temperamental Frenchman who usually threw plates for sport, was meticulously wiping down the counters himself. Big party coming in, whispered Marco, one of the busboys, as he loaded a tray near Sofia. The owner called, said to clear the entire VIP mezzanine. Sofia felt a prickle of unease at the base of her neck. Who is it? A senator? Marco shook his head, his eyes wide. Bigger. It's the Morettis. The glass in Sofia's hand slipped, just an inch before she caught it. A splash of ice water hit her wrist. Moretti. The name was like a curse word in certain neighborhoods. In the newspapers, they were waste management consultants or shipping magnates. In the dark corners of the city where Sofia tried not to tread, they were the law. Dante Moretti was the face of the new generation, handsome, brutal, and corporate. But if they were clearing the mezzanine, it meant the old guard was in town. I need to go on break, Sofia said, her voice trembling slightly. No breaks, Henderson barked from the pass. They're here. Line up by the stairs. Everyone! Sofia's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She couldn't leave. To run now would draw attention. To be noticed was to die. She took her place at the end of the line of service, keeping her head down, praying to a god she hadn't spoken to in years, that she would remain invisible. The front doors swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. First came the security, 4 men who looked like they were carved out of granite, scanning the room with dead eyes. Then came Dante Moretti. Sofia risked a glance through her lashes. He was terrifyingly striking, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther, his dark hair slicked back, his jaw set in a line of grim determination. He looked like a man who was bored with violence, but very, very good at it. But the room didn't freeze for Dante. It froze for the man walking behind him, Don Salvatore Moretti, the capo dei capi of the old world. He was in his late 60s, leaning heavily on an ebony cane topped with a silver lion's head. He wore a fedora and a long wool coat, looking like a relic from a different time. His face was a map of scars and deep lines, his eyes hidden behind tinted glasses. Silence swept through the restaurant. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations died. Henderson was practically vibrating with nerves. "Welcome, Don Moretti. Mr. Moretti. It is an honor." Dante raised a hand, cutting him off. "The table. Now." "Of course. Right this way." As the procession moved past the line of staff, Sophia held her breath. "Don't look up. Don't look up. Don't look up." Don Salvatore stopped. He was standing right in front of her. The scent of expensive cigars and old leather washed over her. Sophia stared at the polished tips of his shoes. "This one," Salvatore said. His voice was like grinding gravel. "She's shaking." Dante sighed, sounding exhausted. "Papa, let's sit. The girl is just nervous." "Fear is good," Salvatore murmured. He tapped Sophia's shoe with his cane. "Look at me, Bambina." Sophia squeezed her eyes shut for a microsecond, summoning every ounce of the persona she had crafted. The shy, terrified nobody. She looked up, widening her eyes, letting her lower lip tremble. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, pitching her voice higher than usual. I've never seen a real famous person before." Salvatore stared at her. His eyes, dark and intelligent, bored into hers. For a second, Sophia thought he saw right through the uniform, right through the fear, down to the blood in her veins. Then he laughed. A dry, wheezing sound. "Famous. Yes. Bring us the wine, little mouse. And don't drop it." They moved on. Sophia exhaled, realizing her knees were actually knocking together. She had survived the arrival, but the night had only just begun. Dante Moretti unbuttoned his suit jacket as he sat, scanning the mezzanine. It was secure. His men were at the stairwell and the kitchen entrance. Still, he couldn't relax. Having his father in New York was a logistical nightmare. Salvatore didn't understand that the world had changed. He didn't care about RICO acts or surveillance cameras. He wanted respect, he wanted wine, and he wanted to critique Dante's handling of the American branch. "The architecture is soulless," Salvatore grumbled, gesturing vaguely at the high ceilings. "Like a bank. You eat in a bank, Dante?" "It's modern, Papa. It's what people like," Dante replied, signaling the sommelier. He didn't want the sommelier. He wanted a double scotch, but tonight was about tradition. "People like what we tell them to like," Salvatore countered. He looked around the table. His old consigliere, Rocco, and two of his Sicilian guards sat in silence. "Where is the mouse? I want wine." Dante signaled Henderson, who frantically pushed the terrified waitress towards the stairs. Dante watched her approach. She was small, pale, with frantic brown eyes. She held the heavy bottle of Barolo like it was a bomb. She's going to faint, Dante thought. Great. Another mess to clean up. "Open it," Salvatore commanded, as Sophia reached the table. Her hands were shaking. But as Dante watched, he noticed something odd. The moment the corkscrew touched the bottle, the shaking stopped. Her movements became precise, fluid. The leverage was perfect. The pop was barely a whisper, a professional pour. She didn't spill a drop. Interesting, Dante thought. Nerves of steel when the work starts. She placed the glass in front of Salvatore. The old Don swirled the wine, took a sniff, and then looked up at her with a mischievous glint in his eye. He was testing her. He always tested the help. It was a power play he enjoyed, making the commoners squirm. "You are Italian?" Salvatore asked her in English. "Yes, sir. My grandmother," she whispered. "Where from?" "Naples, sir." Salvatore scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Naples. Noisy people. Thieves and singers." Dante saw the waitress's jaw tighten. Just a fraction. A flicker of something that wasn't fear. It looked like insulted pride. Salvatore leaned forward, switching to standard Italian. "Do you understand this? Or are you just an American girl with a vowel at the end of her name?" Sophia lowered her head. "I understand a little," Signore, she replied in passable, broken Italian. Salvatore smirked. He turned to Rocco, switching languages again. This time he didn't speak English or standard Italian. He slipped into the heavy, thick dialect of the Sicilian interior, specifically a localized slang from the mountains near Corleone. It was a language of shepherds and bandits, incomprehensible even to most Italians. "Look at her, Rocco," Salvatore said in the dialect, grinning. "Pretty face, but empty eyes. Like a sheep waiting for the butcher. We could take her back to the villa. She'd warm a bed nicely before we discard her." It was a crude, brutal test. Salvatore often said shocking things in the dialect to see if anyone flinched. If they did, he knew they were listening. If they didn't, they were safe. Dante stiffened. He hated when his father spoke like that. "Papa, enough," he warned in English. But then it happened. Sophia was backing away, the tray clutched to her chest. She should have just walked away. She should have kept being the invisible girl. But the insult, the specific, vulgar phrasing about being a sheep for the butcher, struck a chord deep inside her that bypassed her survival instinct. She stopped. She turned back to the table. The silence at the table was absolute. Dante watched her, confused. Was she going to cry? Sophia looked directly at Salvatore. The fear was gone from her face. Her posture shifted, her chin lifted, and for a terrifying moment she looked like royalty. She opened her mouth, and the sound that came out was not the high-pitched whisper of the waitress. It was a low, guttural, perfect rhythmic cadence. "The sheep that survives is the one that watches the wolf sleep, Don Salvatore, and a guest who insults the host's bread eats ash in the morning." She spoke in the dialect, not just Sicilian, his dialect, the specific archaic phrasing of the Moretti stronghold. It was a phrasing that used words that hadn't been common since the 1970s. The crash was deafening. Rocco had dropped his fork against the china. The two guards at the end of the table instantly reached into their jackets, their eyes locking onto Sophia. But Dante didn't move. He couldn't. He was staring at his father. For the first time in Dante's life, he saw Don Salvatore Moretti look truly stunned. The old man's mouth hung slightly open. The color had drained from his face. He looked at Sophia not as a waitress, but as if he were seeing a ghost. "Who are you?" Salvatore whispered, his voice trembling. The spell broke. Sophia's eyes widened as the realization of what she had done crashed down on her. The mask had slipped. She had just outed herself in front of the most dangerous family in existence. I have to get the antipasto," she gasped. She turned and ran. Not a fast walk. She sprinted toward the kitchen doors. "Get her!" Salvatore roared, slamming his cane onto the table, shattering a wine glass. "Bring her to me, now!" Dante was already out of his chair. "Stay here," he ordered his men, his mind racing. He vaulted over the low railing of the mezzanine and took off after the waitress. He burst through the kitchen doors just in time to see the back door of the restaurant swinging shut. "Move!" Dante shouted, shoving a terrified sous chef out of the way. He kicked the back door open and spilled out into the rainy alleyway. He looked left, then right. At the far end of the alley, he saw her. She was fast. She was scaling a chain-link fence with a dexterity that no waitress should possess. "Stop!" Dante yelled, his hand instinctively going to the holstered gun at his back. She paused at the top of the fence, looking back at him. Under the harsh yellow light of the street lamp, their eyes met. Dante expected to see terror. Instead, he saw calculation. She wasn't running like a victim. She was retreating like a soldier. "You don't know what you've done," Dante called out, stepping forward. "I know exactly who you are, Dante Moretti," she shouted back, her voice clear and steady. "And I know that if your father finds out who I really am, he won't just kill me. He'll burn this whole city down." She dropped down to the other side and vanished into the night. Dante stood alone in the rain, the adrenaline pumping through his veins. He touched his earpiece. "Boss?" His head of security crackled in his ear. Do we lock down the restaurant? Forget the restaurant, Dante growled, staring at the empty fence. Find the girl. Find out everything. And do not let my father get to her first. Sophia didn't stop running until her lungs burned like she'd swallowed fire. She zigzagged through the labyrinth of Tribeca, doubling back through alleys, cutting through a subway station without getting on a train, and finally emerging 6 blocks away. She ducked into a 24-hour laundromat, collapsing onto a plastic chair in the back corner, hidden by a row of churning dryers. She pressed her forehead against her knees, trying to stop the shaking. Stupid, 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 stupid. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of dyeing her hair this mousy brown, of wearing clothes that hid her figure, of suppressing the fire that ran in her blood. And she had thrown it all away because of an insult. But it wasn't just an insult. It was that dialect. Hearing it had triggered a muscle memory, a visceral reaction from a childhood she had tried to bury. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a burner, a cheap prepaid flip phone she kept for emergencies. Only one person had the number. She flipped it open. A text message. They are looking. Leave the apartment. Now. Sophia stared at the screen. She crushed the phone in her hand, broke the SIM card, and dropped the pieces into a nearby trash can. She couldn't go back to Queens. Her apartment was compromised. Her stash of cash was under the floorboards there, along with the passport that said her name was Maria Fiore. She was Sophia Rossi again. Or rather, she was who she was born to be. She checked her pockets, $50 in tips, her locker key, a pocket knife she always carried. Okay, she whispered to the humming washing machines. Think. What would Papa do? The thought of her father brought a fresh wave of pain. Don't think about the blood. Think about the lesson. Lesson 4. When the wolf is on the trail, do not run to the den. Run to the water. She stood up, wiped her face, and walked out of the laundromat. She needed to get to the docks in Red Hook. There was an old associate there, a man who owed her family a debt that death hadn't cancelled. Meanwhile, back at Il Giglio, the atmosphere was funeral grim. The restaurant had been cleared. The staff were being held in the kitchen, their phones confiscated. Dante paced the private dining room, watching his father. Don Salvatore was sitting in a chair, staring at a blank wall. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. He was drinking grappa, his hand trembling slightly. Papa, Dante said, keeping his voice low. The boys are scrubbing the CCTV footage. We have a trace on her employee file. Fake social security, fake address. She's a ghost. Salvatore didn't look up. She spoke the Arberesh of the inner circle, Dante. Not just the dialect. The code. I heard, Dante said, pouring himself a drink. She threatened you. Said you'd eat ash. No, Salvatore corrected him sharply. It wasn't a threat. It was a proverb. A guest who insults the host's bread. It is what the wives of the capos used to say to the young men when they got too arrogant. It is a phrase of correction, of authority. Salvatore looked at his son, his eyes haunted. Only one family used that specific phrasing, the Valentis. Dante froze. The glass hovered halfway to his lips. The Valentis are dead. You killed them, all of them. The night of long knives, 1998. You wiped the bloodline. I thought I did, Salvatore whispered. Giovanni Valenti had a daughter, Sophia. She was 12 when the house burned. We found a body. The teeth matched the dental records. Dental records can be faked if you have enough money, Dante said, his mind racing. The Valentis were the only family that had ever truly challenged the Morettis for the throne of Sicily. They were ancient, ruthless, and honorable in a way the modern mob wasn't. If that girl is Sophia Valenti, Salvatore said, his voice hardening into steel, then she is the rightful heir to a vendetta that requires my head on a platter, and she has been serving me water for how long? 6 months, Dante said. He felt a cold sweat break out. He had walked past her every day. He had ignored her. And all that time, she could have poisoned him, stabbed him, burnt the place down. Why hadn't she? Find her, Dante. Salvatore commanded, standing up and leaning on his cane. The frailty was gone. The lion was back. Find her before the Russos find out she exists. If our enemies learn that a Valenti lives, they will rally behind her. It will be civil war. I'll bring her to you, Dante promised. Alive, Salvatore added. I want to look into her eyes when I finish what I started 20 years ago. Dante nodded and turned to leave, but as he walked out into the cool night air, he made a decision. He would find Sofia Valenti, but he wasn't sure he was going to give her to his father, because for the first time in his life, Dante Moretti was intrigued, and for a man who had everything, a mystery was the only thing worth chasing. The rain in New York doesn't wash things clean, it just makes the grime slicker. By the time Sofia reached Red Hook, the storm had turned the city into a blurred watercolor of neon and grey. The docks were a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and cranes that looked like the skeletons of prehistoric beasts. She limped toward a dilapidated bait shop at the edge of Pier 41. It looked abandoned, the windows boarded up with plywood that had rotted around the nails. But Sofia knew better. She knew that 3 feet below the waterline there was a sensor. If you didn't knock on the door in the right rhythm, 2 fast, 1 slow, 3 fast, the shotgun rigged behind the frame would turn your chest into pulp. She knocked. Rat-tat, thud, rat-tat-tat. A long silence followed. Then the screech of a rusty deadbolt sliding back. The door cracked open, revealing a slice of darkness and the barrel of a Remington 870. "We're closed," a voice rasped. It sounded like chains dragging over concrete. "The tide is high, Enzo," Sofia said, her voice steady despite the shivering of her body. "But the fish aren't biting." The shotgun lowered instantly. The door swung wide. Enzo the Butcher Morello stood there. He was 70 years old, wearing a grease-stained tank top that revealed arms covered in faded ink. He had been her father's most loyal lieutenant, the man who had smuggled her out of Sicily wrapped in a rug on a fishing trawler the night her family died. "Sofia," he whispered, his eyes widening. He pulled her inside and slammed the door, throwing 3 different locks. "Madre de Dio, I thought you were in Queens. I thought you were safe." "I was," Sofia said, leaning against a stack of lobster traps, sliding down until she hit the floor. "Until tonight, I saw him, Enzo. I saw Salvatore." Enzo's face went pale. He hurried over, handing her a ragged towel and a bottle of cheap brandy. "You saw him? Did he see you?" "He saw a waitress," Sofia said, taking a burning swig of the liquor. "But then he insulted the family. In the dialect. I couldn't help it, Enzo. I answered him." Enzo closed his eyes and cursed softly in Italian. "You answered the devil in his own tongue. Now the whole pack will be hunting." "I need the package, Enzo," she said, staring at him. "The one Papa left." Enzo hesitated. He looked at the girl he had protected from the shadows for 20 years. "It's suicide, Sofia. If you open that box, there is no going back to being a waitress. You become the Don again. You become the target." "I am already the target," she said, standing up. The exhaustion seemed to fall away, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "Give it to me." Enzo sighed, defeated by the look in her eyes, the exact same look her father, Giovanni Valenti, used to have before he ordered a hit. He walked behind the counter and pried up a loose floorboard. From the dark recess, he pulled out a heavy steel briefcase wrapped in oilcloth. He placed it on the counter. Sofia ran her fingers over the cold metal. Inside were the codes to the Valenti offshore accounts, the contact list of the sleeper agents her father had embedded across Europe, and most importantly, the Libro Rosso, the Red Book. It contained the evidence of every bribe, every murder, and every betrayal committed by the other 5 families in the last 30 years. It was nuclear leverage. "Take it," Enzo said. "There's a boat at the end of the pier, the Lucia. Key is under the mat. Go to Jersey, I'll hold them off if they come." "They won't come for you, Enzo," she said softly. "They don't know you're alive." Crash! The skylight above them shattered. Glass rained down like diamonds. Ropes dropped from the ceiling beams. Before Enzo could raise his shotgun, a flashbang grenade detonated in the center of the room. The world turned white. A high-pitched ringing screamed in Sophia's ears. She was thrown back against the lobster traps, the breath knocked out of her. Through the smoke and the ringing, she saw shadows dropping from the ceiling. Tactical gear, night vision, suppressors. This wasn't the police, and it wasn't the Moretti Street soldiers. This was high-end military precision. Enzo roared, firing blindly into the smoke. Boom! One shadow went down, but 3 red laser dots converged on Enzo's chest. "No!" Sophia screamed, scrambling for the briefcase. "Thwip, thwip, thwip!" Enzo jerked backward, 3 holes appearing in his chest. He slumped over the counter, dead before he hit the wood. Sophia didn't have time to mourn. Instinct took over. She grabbed the handle of the steel briefcase and rolled to her right, just as bullets chewed up the floor where she had been standing. She scrambled behind a heavy industrial freezer. The back door. She needed the back door. She kicked the freezer door open, creating a momentary shield, and bolted for the rear exit. Bullets sparked off the metal doorframe as she burst out onto the rotting wood of the pier. The rain was torrential now. The wind howled. She sprinted toward the Lucia, the small fishing boat bobbing violently in the chop. "Nowhere to run, Principessa!" a voice shouted over the wind. Sophia skidded to a halt. Standing between her and the boat was Dante Moretti. He was alone. He held a handgun at his side, pointed at the ground. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was soaking wet in his ruined suit, his hair plastered to his forehead. "You led them to me!" Sophia spat, clutching the briefcase to her chest, backing away towards the edge of the pier. "I didn't lead anyone," Dante shouted back, stepping forward. "I came alone! Look at them, Sophia! Those aren't my men!" Sophia glanced back at the bait shop. The tactical team was pouring out of the back door. They raised their weapons, not just at her, but at Dante, too. "Drop the weapon, Moretti!" the lead commando shouted. "Or we have orders to clean the whole slate!" Dante looked confused for a fraction of a second. "What? It's a coup, you idiot!" Sophia yelled. "Duck!" She didn't run. She didn't jump into the water. She reached into her apron pocket. She was still wearing the damn waitress apron, and pulled out the flashbang she had swiped from the floor of the bait shop when the first soldier went down. She pulled the pin and lobbed it over Dante's head, straight at the tactical team. Bang! Dante flinched, shielding his eyes. When he looked up, the tactical team was disorganized, blinded. "Move!" Sophia screamed, grabbing Dante by the lapel of his expensive suit and dragging him toward the edge of the pier. "What are you doing?" Dante yelled. "Saving your life, so I can kill you later." She shoved him, hard. Dante toppled backward off the pier, splashing into the freezing, oily water of the Hudson River. Sophia clutched the briefcase and jumped in right after him. Bullets ripped into the water above them, leaving trails of bubbles like angry hornets. But the dark, churning current of the Hudson swallowed them whole. The underside of Pier 41 was a forest of rotting wood pilings and barnacles. The smell was a toxic mix of sewage and gasoline. Dante Moretti gasped for air, surfacing in the gloom under the pier. The water was bone-chillingly cold. He thrashed, trying to find purchase on a slippery crossbeam. "Quiet," a voice hissed from the darkness. He froze. Sophia was clinging to a piling 3 feet away, the steel briefcase strapped to her wrist with a belt. She was shivering violently, her waitress uniform plastered to her skin, but her eyes were focused on the gaps in the floorboards above them. Heavy boots stomped overhead. Flashlight beams cut through the cracks, slicing into the darkness below. "Clear!" a voice echoed from above. "They went under. Current probably took them. Deploy the thermal drone." "Thermal," Dante whispered, panic rising in his chest. "We need to move. Now." "Shut up," Sophia snapped. "Follow me. Stay low. If you splash, I leave you." She pushed off the piling, swimming with a silent, frog-like stroke deeper into the labyrinth of the underpier. Dante followed, his muscles seizing from the cold. He was a boxer, a shooter, a man who spent 2 hours a day in the gym, but he was struggling to keep up with the slender girl who had served him wine 2 hours ago. She led him to a rusted maintenance ladder encrusted with algae. They climbed up into a storm-drained tunnel that ran beneath the West Side Highway. It was relatively dry, smelling of damp earth and rats. They collapsed on the concrete ledge, both of them gasping for breath. Dante rolled onto his back, staring at the curved ceiling. Those men. They were wearing Russian gear, but they spoke English with American accents. "Mercenaries," Sophia said, wringing out her hair. She checked the briefcase. It was sealed tight. High-end, private contractors. "Who sent them?" Dante asked, sitting up. "My father?" Sophia laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Your father wants to kill me himself. He wouldn't send a faceless hit squad to blow up a bait shop. He's old school. He'd want to look me in the eye." She turned to face him, the dim light from a street grate above casting shadows across her face. "And they tried to kill you, Dante. You saw the lasers. If I hadn't thrown that flashbang, your brains would be painting the dock right now." Dante went silent. She was right. The Order had been clean the slate. "Someone wants a war," Dante said slowly, the gears in his mind turning. "If I die, and the last Valenti dies, who benefits?" "Chaos benefits the hungry," Sophia said, quoting another proverb. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "The Russos are too stupid for this precision. The Costellos are too broke." "It's someone inside," Dante realized, the thought tasting like bile. "Someone who knew where I was going. Only 3 people knew I was tracking you to Red Hook." "Your father," Sophia listed. "No, he wouldn't kill me." "Your head of security, Thorne." Dante shook his head. "Thorne took a bullet for me last year. He's loyal." "Loyalty has an expiration date when the check is big enough," Sophia countered. "Who else?" Dante hesitated. "Rocco, the consigliere." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Rocco, the man who sat at the table tonight? The one who laughed when your father called me a sheep?" "He's been with the family since before I was born," Dante said defensively. "Which means he remembers the old days," Sophia said. "He remembers when the Morettis were kings, not corporate CEOs like you. Maybe he thinks you're soft, Dante. Maybe he thinks your father is too old. Maybe he wants the crown." Dante stood up, pacing the small tunnel. "I need a phone. I need to call it in." "You call anyone, you die," Sophia said calmly. "They can track your voice print. They can triangulate your signal. If Rocco is behind this, he has access to the NSA-level tech your family bought last year." Dante looked at her. Really looked at her. In the dim light, with dirt on her face and a stolen briefcase on her lap, she wasn't the shy waitress. She was a general. "You know a lot about our operations for a girl who busses tables," Dante said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I've been watching you for 3 years," Sophia said. "I know where you eat, who you sleep with, and where you hide your money. That's what the Valenti family did, Dante. We didn't just break knees. We knew things. Knowledge is the only weapon that doesn't run out of bullets." "So why didn't you kill us?" Dante asked. "You poured wine for my father. You could have slipped cyanide in the glass. You could have stabbed me with a steak knife. Why wait?" Sophia looked down at the briefcase. Her expression softened, just for a moment, revealing the 12-year-old girl who had lost everything. "Because death is too easy," she whispered. "Your father killed my mother. He killed my brothers. He burned my house. If I just put a bullet in his head, he dies a legend. The great Don Salvatore." She looked up, her eyes blazing. "I don't want him to die a legend. I want him to die a failure. I want him to watch his empire crumble, piece by piece. I want him to know that a Valenti took it all away from him, not with a gun, but with the truth." She patted the briefcase. "This is the truth, Dante. The Libro Rosso. It has the proof of the collaboration between the 5 families and the senators, the judges, the union leaders. If I release this, the FBI doesn't just arrest you. They dismantle the entire ecosystem. The Moretti name becomes dust. Dante stared at the briefcase. That book. It's a myth. My father said it burned with your house. My father threw it out the window to Enzo before the roof collapsed, Sophia said. Dante ran a hand through his hair. He was trapped. He was standing in a sewer with a woman who held the power to destroy his entire world. And outside, a traitor was hunting them both. So, Dante said, his voice low. What now? You release the book? I go to jail? You get your revenge? I can't release it yet, Sophia admitted. It's encrypted. The key is complicated. And if I surface to try and decrypt it, Rocco's death squad finds me. And now that they know you're alive, they'll find you too. She stood up, wincing as she put weight on her left leg. We have a problem, Dante. We are natural enemies. By all rights, I should kill you right now and take my chances. And you should try to choke me out and take the book. But, Dante interjected, stepping closer, if we do that, Rocco wins. He takes the throne, he buries my father, and he hunts us down one by one. Exactly. Dante extended his hand. It was a gesture of madness, a Moretti shaking hands with a Valenti. It defied 100 years of blood history. A truce, Dante said, until we survive the night, until we find out if it's really Rocco. I help you get to a safe place. You don't release the book. Sophia looked at his hand. She looked at the scars on his knuckles. She looked at his eyes that were surprisingly kind for a man raised by a monster. She didn't shake his hand. I don't shake hands with Morettis, she said coldly, but I won't kill you tonight. Lead the way, boss. You know the city better than I do. Dante dropped his hand, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. You're terrifying. You know that? I'm just the waitress, she deadpanned. Right. And I'm just a waste management consultant. Dante pointed down the tunnel. There's an exit near Chelsea. I have a safe house. Not on the books. Not even my father knows about it. It's an artist's loft. I keep it for private time. You mean for your mistresses? Sophia said, limping past him. I mean for my painting, Dante corrected. Sophia paused and looked back, genuinely surprised. You paint? Everyone needs a hobby, Dante grumbled, walking past her. Come on, before the rats get brave. They moved through the darkness together, two heirs to a broken kingdom, walking toward a dawn that promised nothing but blood. But as they walked, the dynamic shifted. They were no longer predator and prey. They were partners, and in the underworld, a partnership born of necessity is often stronger than a marriage born of love. But neither of them noticed the small, blinking red light on the handle of the briefcase. It wasn't a bomb. It was a tracker. And deep in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Rocco smiled as he watched the blip moving slowly under 10th Avenue. Got you, Rocco whispered, swirling his cognac. Kill the father, kill the son, and bring me the girl. The Valenti witch has something that belongs to me. The safe house was nothing like Sophia expected. She anticipated a bunker, a windowless room with guns on the walls and mattresses on the floor. Instead, Dante led her into a sprawling, high-ceilinged loft in Chelsea. It smelled of turpentine and linseed oil, not gunpowder. The walls were covered in canvases, huge, chaotic, beautiful paintings. There were violent swirls of red and black, faces screaming in silence, hands reaching for help that wasn't there. You really do paint, Sophia whispered, dropping the heavy briefcase onto a pristine white sofa. She walked toward a canvas on an easel. It was unfinished, a portrait of a woman with sad eyes. It keeps the ghosts quiet, Dante said, locking the heavy steel door behind them and engaging a keypad deadbolt. He walked to a kitchenette and pulled out a first aid kit. Sit. Let me look at that leg. Sophia hesitated, then sat on the edge of the sofa. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a throbbing ache in her calf, where she'd scraped it against the pier. Dante knelt before her. He cut away the torn fabric of her waitress uniform with a pair of medical shears. His hands, usually so dangerous, were incredibly gentle. "It's shallow," he said, dabbing antiseptic on the wound. "You won't need stitches." "You have good hands," Sophia murmured, watching him. "For a Moretti." Dante paused, looking up. Their faces were inches apart. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't the tension of survival anymore. It was something magnetic. "And you have a lot of secrets," Dante replied softly, "for a Valenti." He finished bandaging her leg, but didn't pull away. "Why did you save me, Sophia? Really? You could have let the mercenaries take me out. One less Moretti to worry about." Sophia looked at the painting of the woman again. "Because I saw you tonight, in the restaurant, when your father insulted me. You flinched. You hated it. You aren't him, Dante." "I am him," Dante said bitterly, standing up and walking to the window to peer through the blinds. "I run his business. I clean his messes. I am the heir to the throne." "You're a prisoner," Sophia corrected him, "just like I was. We're both just children cleaning up our father's blood." Dante turned back to look at her, a look of raw vulnerability on his face. For a moment, the Mafia prince was gone. He walked back to her, drawn by a gravity he couldn't explain. He reached out, his fingers grazing her cheek. Sophia didn't flinch. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "If we get out of this," Dante whispered, "I'm done. I'm leaving the life. I'll take the money, and I'll go." "There is no leaving," Sophia said sadly. "Not while Rocco is hunting us. Not while that book exists." She looked down at the briefcase. A sudden, cold realization washed over her. "Dante," she said, her voice sharp. "The handle." "What?" "The handle of the case. It's warm." Dante's eyes widened. He lunged for the case, flipping it over. Embedded in the matte black steel near the hinge was a tiny, pulsing red LED, no bigger than a pinhead. "Tracker," Dante hissed. "High frequency. How long?" Sophia stood up, ignoring the pain in her leg. Dante checked his watch. "If he was tracking us from Red Hook, he's not coming alone. He's bringing the hammer." Crack! The skylight exploded. It was exactly how Enzo had died. History repeating itself. Ropes dropped. But this time Dante was ready. He grabbed Sophia and tackled her behind a heavy oak drafting table, just as the room filled with tear gas. "Gas masks! Under the sink!" Dante yelled, firing blindly over the table with his handgun. The door to the loft blew inward with a deafening boom. Through the smoke, figures emerged. But they weren't just mercenaries this time. Leading them, wearing a gas mask that made him look like a mechanized insect, was Rocco, and he was dragging someone. Dante squinted through the stinging gas. "Papa?" Don Salvatore Moretti was thrown onto the floor in the center of the room. He wasn't bound, but he was disoriented, coughing violently. Rocco ripped his own mask off, smiling like a shark. The ventilation system in the loft was already sucking the gas out. "Come out, Dante!" Rocco shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Come out and introduce your girlfriend to your father properly." Dante looked at Sophia. "He's using him as a shield." "No," Sophia said, her mind racing. "He's setting a stage. He wants Salvatore to see us together. He wants to frame you." "We have to end this," Dante said. He checked his magazine. "I have 6 rounds. There are 10 men." "I have the book," Sophia said. "And I know the code." She stood up. "Sophia, no!" Dante grabbed for her, but she was already moving. She walked out from behind the table, hands raised, the steel briefcase in her left hand. "Hold fire!" Rocco screamed to his men. He grinned. "Look at this. The waitress returns." Don Salvatore pushed himself up on his hands and knees. He looked frail, confused. He looked up and saw Sophia. Then he saw Dante emerge behind her, gun raised. "Dante," Salvatore rasped. You are with her, with the Valenti." "He told you I kidnapped her, didn't he, Don Salvatore?" Sophia said, her voice calm, echoing through the loft. She walked until she was 10 feet from Rocco. "He told me," Salvatore spat, regaining some of his fire, "that my son had betrayed me, that he was selling our secrets to the Valentis, that he was going to kill me to take the crown. And you believed him?" Dante yelled, his gun trained on Rocco's head. "Papa, look at him. He hired the Russians. He tried to kill me at the pier." "Lies," Rocco said smoothly. He pressed the barrel of his gun against Salvatore's temple. "Drop the gun, Dante, or the old lion sleeps tonight." The room froze. It was a Mexican standoff. Dante couldn't shoot Rocco without risking his father. Rocco held all the cards. "You want the book, Rocco?" Sophia asked, lifting the briefcase. "This is what you want, right?" "Give it to me," Rocco demanded, "and I might let the boy live. The old man, well, his time is up anyway." "You don't want the book because of the leverage against the senators," Sophia said, her voice rising. "You want it because of page 42. Rocco's eyes flickered, a micro-expression of panic. "What is on page 42? Salvatore asked, looking between them. "The list of skimming operations from 1995 to 2005, Sophia lied. She didn't know the page number, but she knew the crime. She had read Enzo's notes. "Rocco didn't just serve you, Don Salvatore. He was stealing from you. 10% of every shipment. He built his own empire on your crumbs." "She's lying," Rocco screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Kill them! Kill them both!" "Wait," Sophia shouted. "I'll open it. I'll prove it." She set the case on the floor. She knelt. She spun the dials. 12/25/98. The date her house burned down. Her father's dark sense of humor. Click. The latches popped open. Rocco stepped forward, greed overtaking his caution. He pushed Salvatore aside and aimed his gun at Sophia. "Show me." Sophia opened the case. It was empty. Rocco stared. "Where is it? Where is the book?" Sophia looked up, a terrifying smile on her face. "I burned it 3 years ago, Rocco. The leverage isn't in the book." She tapped her temple. "It's in here." Rocco's face twisted in rage. "You bitch!" He raised his gun to execute her. Bang! The shot didn't come from Dante. Rocco stiffened. A look of total shock crossed his face. He looked down. A red flower was blooming on his chest. He turned slowly. Don Salvatore Moretti was standing there, holding a small .22 caliber pistol he had pulled from his ankle holster, the one place Rocco hadn't checked. "You stole from me, Rocco?" Salvatore whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "You stole from the family?" Rocco gargled blood, collapsing to his knees. I made you—" "You are nothing," Salvatore said. He fired again. Bang! Rocco hit the floor. The mercenaries, seeing their paymaster dead, looked at each other. They were professionals. No check, no fight. "Leave!" Dante roared, waving his gun at the door. "Get out before I call the NYPD." The mercenaries didn't hesitate. They scrambled out of the broken door, vanishing into the night. Silence returned to the loft, heavier than before. Don Salvatore stood over Rocco's body, breathing hard. He dropped the small gun and slumped against a pillar. Dante holstered his weapon and rushed to his father, catching him before he slid to the floor. "Papa," Dante said, checking the old man's pulse. "You okay?" "I'm old," Salvatore grumbled, pushing Dante away weakly. "Not dead." He adjusted his coat, then looked up. Sophia was still kneeling by the empty briefcase. Salvatore tapped his cane, which Rocco had thrown on the floor, against the metal case. "You lied," he rasped, "about the book." "I bluffed," Sophia corrected him, standing up. "A Valenti knows how to play poker." Salvatore studied her. For a long, agonizing minute, the only sound was the wind whistling through the broken skylight. He looked at her face, really looked at her, and saw the ghost of Giovanni Valenti. "You have your father's eyes," Salvatore said quietly, "and his stubbornness." "And you have a debt," Sophia said, her voice steady. "I saved your son. I saved your empire from a traitor, and I spared your life in the sewer when I could have let you rot." Salvatore nodded slowly. "This is true. The omerta is clear. A life for a life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy gold ring. The Moretti signet. He looked at Dante, then at Sofia. "I am tired, Dante," Salvatore sighed. "Tonight, I saw that I cannot trust the men I raised. Except you." He looked at Sofia. "The feud ends tonight. The Valentis are dead. You are Sofia Rossi. You are a waitress. Correct?" Sofia hesitated. She looked at Dante. She saw the hope in his eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "Just a waitress." "Good," Salvatore said. "My son needs a good woman, not a soldier. But if you ever speak that dialect in public again—" He narrowed his eyes, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "I will fire you." Dante laughed. It was a sound of pure relief. He wrapped his arm around Sofia's waist, pulling her close. "Let's get you home, Papa," Dante said. The reopening of Il Giglio was the event of the season. The press was there, snapping photos of politicians and celebrities. But the real power was at table 1, on the mezzanine. Dante Moretti sat at the head of the table. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a tuxedo, but his tie was loose. He looked relaxed, happier. Don Salvatore sat to his right, looking frail but content, sipping his Barolo. "The service here has improved," Salvatore commented, watching the floor. "I have a new manager," Dante said, grinning. Sofia walked up to the table. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a stunning, backless red dress that cost more than the car she used to drive. She didn't carry a tray. She carried herself like a queen. "Gentlemen," she said, resting her hand on Dante's shoulder. "Everything to your liking?" "Perfect, amore," Dante said, kissing her hand. Salvatore looked up at her. "The wine is good, but the bread is cold." Sofia didn't flinch. She leaned down, right next to the old Don's ear, and whispered in perfect, heavy Sicilian dialect, "Eat the bread you're given, old wolf, or the cook will put you on a diet." Salvatore froze. Then he threw his head back and laughed, a loud, booming laugh that made the whole restaurant turn and look. "She's terrifying," Salvatore told his son, wiping a tear from his eye. "Keep her." Sofia smiled, squeezed Dante's hand, and walked away to greet the other guests. She was no longer invisible. She was Sofia Moretti, the woman who had tamed the lions, and as she moved through the room, nobody dared to look away.